Actually, we were just farmers, more used to the lie than the gun, up against the crown with our freedom to win, and Sheemore was as good a place as any to have a go. It's a wonder it ever happened. We were late. We had the whole operation planned and a good spot picked out, but we were late. We ran up the hill with our 6 rifles and every bullet we had. We were a hand-pinned bunch, 9 of us in all, Sean Mitchell in charge, me, Harry McEwen second, along with the 2 Nangles, Joe and John. Joe was captain of the Shambo IRA. Joe it was that cooked up the whole thing back in February. We were to pass information to the RIC in Carrick that a bunch of IRA men would be in Gaeltacht on the first Friday in March, and it was Nangle who brought back the information that they'd fallen for the bait. Nangle was quick, clever as a fox and as thin as a rail, and along with Charlie McGowan, a great shot. So who else was there along with Mitchell and me? John and Joe and Angle, McGowan. Michael Martin, another man on the run. You see, back in September, he had been involved in an unsuccessful attack on members of an RIC cycling patrol at Cremlin at the Cavan Leitrim border, the first attack of its kind in Leitrim. He was a stonecutter by trade, strong as an ox, and very religious. Always did the 9 first Fridays. We told him he could go to Mass any day, but if he wanted to shoot tans, Friday was the day. Michael Gahagan, of course, doing most of the slagging. Gahagan from Ahacashel, a cheery man with a great sense of humour, and at the time he was stepping out with Rose Ann Crowley, a teacher in the National School in Leitrim Village. Michael was a finest singer you'd meet in a day's walk, and when he lifted his voice on the side of Sheemore, it was all we could do to stop him from singing at the top of his lungs. I despise the Rose of England and all its English rule, but if you want to see the Rose I love, then go to Leitrim School. Well, next to Gahagan, you had Matty Boylan, the youngest of 6 brothers. 4 already in America, and by rights Matty should have gone with them. But the eldest brother wouldn't let him off the land. So at 17, Matty ran away, moved to Drumshanbo, and worked for Andrew Mooney. It wasn't long before he was using Mooney's car to transport guns for the IRA, and that made up the unit. But like I said, by the time we got there, we were late getting into position. The auxiliaries and RIC had already left Carrick and had arrived in Gaeltacht without a single shot being fired. We knew now there would be 3 Crossley tenders loaded with troops and only 9 of us. McGowan said there was 4 lorries. Well, that's Charlie for you, always exaggerating. But in plain language, it was a convoy of 3 lorries, and if they hadn't taken the same road back as they came, well, that would have been a different story.
Harry McEwen is talking through his hat, pontificating again. And I know what you're about to say. If anyone is going to start a row, it'll be me. They all say I'm a fiery character. Hot-headed, on account of the red hair. Well, first things first, McEwen left out my name. I was the 9th man, Thomas Riley. And it's not just McEwen that has annoyed me. I was permanently riled up by the lack of action here in Leitrim. Me and my brother John Joe were already on the run from Crown forces, but, in truth, there wasn't a whole lot happening on the ground. The IRA in Leitrim said they were afflicted with informers and collaborators, ancient order of Hibernians and Orangemen with their stronghold in Carrigallen. Michael Collins called Leitrim the most treacherous county in Ireland. I don't know about that. All I'm saying is that I didn't think we were playing our full part in the rebel effort. Not like Longford, where Sean McEwen and Sean Connolly were in charge. So I went to Longford to volunteer with them. But they sent me packing. Wait, they said, for Connolly to take over in Leitrim. He was a Collins man, and he got his orders directly from GHQ. One of the first things Connolly did when he arrived at the start of 1921 was to mobilise the flying columns. Full-time active service units made up of men like me and my brother John Joe. The flying columns always kept on the move. We never stayed more than a night or two in the one place. John Joe was in the number 2 flying column of the South Leitrim Brigade, led by Sean Connolly himself, and I served in the number 1 flying column, led by Sean Mitchell. The columns got food and rest in a string of safe houses and hideouts, and the women provided us with clean shirts and knitted socks. Several of the members of Come On Demand saw active service too. They found the safe houses for us and cooked for the columns. They carried intelligence and dispatches, guns sometimes, and ammunition, and they organised dances held in the fields, well back from the road, with the door maybe taken off a barn. And while the crack was going on, we kept lookouts posted so we wouldn't get taken by surprise. In between the dances, we raided post offices and robbed trains, intercepted the mail and trenched the roads, or we built walls across the roads and took down telephone wires to cause maximum disruption. The Crown forces fought back with curfews and retaliations. All doors to be closed between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. All licensed premises closed by 6 o'clock in the evening. No big gatherings for fair days, but we kept up the daily raids anyway, from Gaeltacht to Carrigallen. Months passed, executing raids and ambushes, but no lives were taken. That all changed on Friday the 4th of March.
If I remember correctly, it was a sharp, cold, dry morning. I was celebrating the first Friday Mass and I had a big congregation. Everyone, I think, was looking forward to joining me in the forthcoming St. Patrick's Day celebrations here in St. Patrick's Church in Galway. I'm a Cavan man myself, originally, and I have served as a curate in Gaeltacht and Clongish, Columkill and Clonbrony in County Longford before I came here to Galway. I came here in February 1917, and I can honestly say that from the start the parishioners here in Leitrim has made me very welcome. Maybe it was because I was seen to be openly sympathetic to the Republican movement, and I'm not for 1 minute suggesting I was actively involved in planning an ambush on Sheemore Hill, a scenic prominence that stands directly across the fields from this very church. Sheemore, a name that comes from the Irish the Hill of the Fairies, if you give any credence to such things. Indeed, it came as no small surprise when Crown forces showed up at my church in such large numbers. First we heard the roar of the engines outside, British voices barking orders, then the troops in their heavy boots as they piled down off their trucks to surround the house of God. At any moment I expected the crack of a rifle butt to break down the vestry door. The army auxiliaries, in their disorderly hand-me-down uniforms of black and tan, and the RIC men with their police batons and pistol, whether they were acting on a tip-off from an informer, or whether they'd been given false information in a deliberate ruse to lure them into a deadly ambush, I wouldn't venture to guess. The Mass ended. The congregation stood while I left the altar, and everybody went out by the side and front doors. Parishioners immediately found themselves being rounded up by a mixed force of RIC and auxiliaries from the 1st Battalion of the Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire Regiment. They had only recently arrived in Leitrim, the regiment having been stationed at Finner Camp to quell dissent in Donegal. I'd estimate that there was about 40 in all between constabulary, military and the tans. Mercifully, everybody stayed calm. People were accustomed to being stopped and harassed. Even so, it was unusual for the tans to detain parishioners coming out of Mass, God-fearing people still fasting from communion. I voiced my objection to the commanding officer, a fresh-faced man in his early 20s. I've since learned that his father was a professor at the Royal College of Music in London. I asked him what he was supposed to be doing. He said they were there conducting a raid for gunmen and weapons. If you think we're going to ransack my church, I said, you have another thing coming, but he looked down his nose at me. A party of armed soldiery searched the confession box, went behind the altar, walked between the seats, looking under the kneelers. They climbed up onto the gallery. I heard them kick the risers and the wooden steps with their toes of their boots, hoping to find loose boards and hidey holes. They must have lifted the lid on the organ, because I heard the sound of keys being pressed and coarse laughter. They were mercenaries, cruel, battled, hardened, loutish, with a destructive element and trigger-happy. That's what they were known for, shooting and burning. God's curse on them. And when they had the deprivation done, they'd paint slogans on the walls, warnings that made people's blood boil, and were in fact better than any recouping poster for Ireland's cause. Outside the church, the men were made to line up on one side and the women on the other. Everyone got searched, the men with their coats open, holding their hands up in the cold morning air to be roughly patted down and have their pockets turned out. As God is my witness, I saw a woman working for the constabulary. Her job was to search the other women.
My name is Alice Gray, and I'm a qualified nurse. I joined the Royal Irish Constabulary in 1920 as a police searcher. On the morning of March the 4th, 1921, I had orders to accompany a mixed force of military and RIC to Gaeltacht. There I would be required to search the female members of the congregation for concealed weapons or dispatches. For too long the women had been free agents. Modesty and proper decorum prevented the military or members of the constabulary from laying hands on their person. On seeing me they were quite aggrieved by my presence, but I will say they expressed an admirable forbearance. Mostly, as they lined up to be frisked, I received the silent treatment, which certainly didn't ruffle me, though I can't quite say when I turned up nothing whether I felt disappointed or relieved. It's a dreadful thing to have any young woman go to jail, but especially a young mother, and no incriminating material was found on the women or the men inside the church in the follow-up search. We left empty-handed, though not quite. Before we took off for Carrick, Eric, or should I say Lieutenant Chilvers Wilson, gallantly reached down and picked a bunch of daffodils. If the flowers were intended for me, perhaps he had second thoughts about presenting them in front of his men. Leastways, he never gave them to me, or he never got the chance. We were approximately a mile down the road when our convoy came under violent attack. We were taken completely by surprise. In a sudden hail of bullets, our three crusty tenders, travelling a moment before at a sturdy 15 miles per hour, ground to a halt. All at once, every one of us had to dive for cover. Bullets seemed to rain down from above, though as soon as our forces had gathered their wits, they returned fire. I was surprised to find that the soldiers had rifles, while the policemen were mostly armed only with pistols, and some members of the constabulary, not to make too fine a point of it, fled for their lives. I found safe cover with the troops behind a stone wall, overgrown in moss and delicate young greenery. The gunfire appeared to be directed at us from the cliff edge, some 200 or 300 yards distant. The gunshots echoed loudly on all sides. On the thickly wooded hillside, gunsmoke drifted between the trees. The lieutenant ordered the private in charge of the rear vehicle to give him covering fire. Then, in the heat of the battle, Lieutenant Wilson, with several others, broke cover and bravely attempted to outflank our invisible ambushers and their giveaway gunsmoke. He made a quick dash for it along the wall, but only got a couple of yards. Taking cognizance of his situation, he was immediately gunned down. Private Graves, along with him, tried to attend to his wounded commanding officer, but he too got struck. Someone capable was needed to administer first aid on the spot, and I had no hesitation in going to the fallen men's assistance. Honestly, it was quite mad. There were bullets flying on all sides, but I had the stone walls for cover, you see. It was quite a long wall, and I crawled as best I could on my hands and knees. I made it as far as Graves, who had been shot in the arm, and tended to his injury with a tourniquet above the wound fashioned from the sleeve of his torn shirt. As for Lieutenant Wilson, I could see right away that he suffered a rather nasty gunshot to his head. He was already as good as dead, poor chap. I did what I could and firmly wound his scarf around his head. And then I set about retrieving the rifles of the fallen men and what spare ammunition I could lay my hands on. I quickly passed the weapons over to their comrades, who might more usefully deploy them. I should estimate the entire affair lasted 20 to 30 minutes. When it was quite clear that our ambushers had fled the scene, I had the men lift their fallen comrades into the trucks. At least 4 men of the Bedfordshire Regiment and 2 RIC men, Sergeant Healy and Constable Costello, were quite badly wounded. A local youth was found to guide us, and our depleted ranks took an alternative route back to Carrick-on-Shannon. There the wounded could receive proper medical treatment. I imagine at that point that I was in a state of shock, but I do recall looking down into my lap to see underfoot, scattered and trampled, the lieutenant's daffodils.
My mistake, of course, and a fatal one at that. We ought to have taken an alternative route. Instead, we drove into a frightful trap. The regiment had only recently arrived in County Leitrim, where we had been confronted with an escalation of IRA violence, chiefly as a result of the arrival of Commandant Sean Connolly, an IRA GHQ organiser from neighbouring County Longford. According to our intelligence, Connolly had been tasked by Michael Collins in person with reorganising IRA structures in Leitrim to increase military operations. And quite frankly, the district was considerably more disturbed than that which we vacated in Donegal. Nevertheless, I had high hopes that we had the personnel and the resources to get the gunmen of the district underhand. The purpose of our raid that morning was to capture several wanted men. Either our intelligence was mistaken, or they'd gotten wind of our arrival. Alas, we left Gowl Church empty-handed. Remounting our tenders, my thoughts were on the report I had to write. The ambush party had chosen their position well, an elevated vantage point on a thickly wooded slope above a cliff from which they could pot us off at will from our open trucks. After the first volley of intense gunfire, we scrambled for cover behind a wall and engaged with the enemy. None of the ambushers were to be seen. Our fire was mainly concentrated on the wood itself. After several minutes under intense hostile fire, I levelled my binoculars on the hillside to ascertain the enemy's whereabouts. I estimated a force of about 20 entrenched in 3 positions. To outflank our ambushers, I led a counter-attack with a plucky bunch of mixed ranks. I wasn't by any means accustomed to guerrilla warfare. I was a Londoner, born in Kensington, the youngest son of Herbert and Sarah Wilson. When the Great War came, I joined the Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire Regiment in 1915 and served as lieutenant in France, and for a period of time as acting captain. I'd been expecting to join the British Expeditionary Forces in India, but was recalled and posted to Ireland in 1920. And it was there I fell, Without ever truly comprehending I'd been shot, transported to Dublin, I died the following day.
Charlie McGoohan, that's me, from Mahu, Ballinamore, born the second youngest of 6 children to George and Maria McGoohan. Good, steady, down-to-earth people. People who only ever wanted a better life for their children. My older brother Patrick became a teacher. He was never as politically active as me. But as a precaution, when he was teaching in Armagh, he got his hands on a rifle. And it was Patrick who taught me to shoot. We were close, and I was very cut up when he caught pneumonia and died. I threw myself into Sinn Féin politics and campaigned in that East Cavan by-election that Arthur Griffith won. When the War of Independence started, I joined a raiding party on some British soldiers guarding a lorry buried to the axle in soft ground below Trimriley. We caught them on the hop and captured a good bunch of rifles. I kept back one of the captured rifles, purely for my own use, and I suppose that's how I got to be known as a crack shot, or at any rate, I had a reputation as an accurate marksman. At the Sheemore Ambush, when I spotted Wilson looking through his binoculars, I said, "Leave this shot to me." The sun shining on them gave me a clear shot. The night before, me and Michael Martin and Matty Boylan had stayed in Mulhans at Kionbrook. All we had to do was cross the fields to Sheemore and out through the iron gate, a tasty job with a spiral twist in the latch from the Kionbrook blacksmith. On the side of the mountain, we were all eyes and of course ears for the sound of the lorries. People would have spotted our column on the move and looked the other way, but yet informers too might have given us away, and we were there a while. The countryside was quiet with everyone at mass. I heard the cows looing and water running in streams. Then I heard them. 4 lorries, packed with black and khaki uniform figures. I think several people said fire at the same time. As soon as fire was opened, the figures started to jump and tumble out of the lorries. It was difficult to say how effective the first volley was, but afterwards it was some time before any of them returned fire. Now and again the soldiers could be glimpsed as they searched for our fire positions. Then they started to shoot, and quite a few of them seemed to have spotted where our fire was coming from, as there were a few ricochets making music around us. One bullet struck a rock so close to Matty Boylan that a splinter of stone struck him in the face. He was bleeding, and for a short time it was thought he'd been hit, until Matty managed to wipe away the blood with a handkerchief. At this stage of the proceedings, I discovered that far from being afraid, I was enjoying myself. And in fact, I was quite vocal and not, I'm afraid, very polite to the enemy. But fearing the arrival of reinforcements, and with our ammunition running low, Mitchell gave us the order to pull back. I was the last to leave, giving cover fire for my comrades while they withdrew from the position. We crossed the hill, and behind the stony slopes of Sheemore, we formed up and marched off across the country in high good humour. Joan Angle led off with, "Boys in khaki, boys in blue, here's the best of jolly good luck to you." This was followed by Eileen Og, a song that was very popular all over the country with the flying columns. In fact, it could be described as the Lily Marlene of the IRA. In James McHugh's house in Attimanis, about 4 miles away, we had dinner. For me, I'd found that far from being wanting when the chips were down, I really did enjoy the affair, and it was really a great feeling. We'd put on a good show, and proved that Leitrim had its fair share of brave men. And then someone remembered the handkerchief, the one used to wipe the blood from Matty Boylan's face. Eileen, oh, me heart is going grey ever since the day you wandered far away. Eileen, oh, there's good fish in the sea, but there's none of them like the pride of Petravore. Friday at the fair in Ballintubber, Eileen met McGrath the cattle jobber.
I was 18 at the time. I remember it well. It was the tracker dogs that they were afraid of. You see, if the RIC had found that blood-stained handkerchief, they'd bring in the tracker dogs to track everyone down. And the scent, that'd lead them to the safe house. And the tans, they'd shoot everybody where they stood, men, women and children. Sure, with their blood up, sure it wouldn't matter to the tans. Well, the men in the safe house, they were getting agitated. Pockets were searched, inside and out. But it was clear that the handkerchief had been left behind in Sheemore. Sure, it was no use sending one of themselves or one of the CULLEN back, or they'd be captured on the spot. And someone, and I don't know who it was, said to send for me. Send for Lizzie Early. Sure, I was living at home. We lived in Edwina, only beside Sheemore. I was the youngest of James and Jane Early's 10 children. I was already a member of Coming On, and I had carried dispatches for the IRA before. I was known for keeping my head, and I hadn't got caught. And so I volunteered. I said I'll cycle back to Sheemore to find the handkerchief to the scene of the ambush. At the time, the whole place, it was teeming with Crown Forces, RIC, soldiery, tans. It was hard to avoid them. And I started off on the bike, heading for Sheemore. I felt all right. But then did I cycle right into a patrol. My legs began to shake. I gripped the brakes and my hands tightened around the handlebars. And a tan with a Cockney accent stopped me. "Bleeding now. Where do you think you're headed?" "I'm out after cattle," I said. Sure, he hadn't the foggiest notion what I was talking about. But another RIC man there said, "Go on, move on." And I kept on for Sheemore, and when I got there, I left my bike again the ditch and I crossed into the field. I had directions all right, so I kind of knew the direction to look for the handkerchief. But my legs were still shaking from the patrol. But as I started to climb the hill, I got me strength back. The best of times, sir. It's a strange old place, Sheemore. There's a big fairy fort surrounded by a ring of hawthorns and the monument on the top that the fairies come out of at Halloween. And they say the whole place belongs to the good people. You wouldn't want to dilly-dally now. The sheep were lambing at the time, and when I spotted something white down between the rocks, I thought for a second, it might be a newborn lamb. And when I got down to it, no, it was no lamb. It was the handkerchief, the blood-stained handkerchief, all right. And I grabbed it quickly. I straightened myself and folded it. I put it up my sleeve and I hurried down. I hurried home. For days after the ambush, we had police and soldiers swarming all over Gaul and Edwina and Kilclar. Our neighbours, they were threatened. Houses were raided. Sheds and outhouses were burnt. The people had a terrible time. It was frightening. Even Gaul Temperance Hall, sure that was set alight. And in Gaeltacht, the tans used sledgehammers to destroy machinery, and they burnt down the building. Oh, and imagine, even the military ordered, even the shops in Drumshambo and Carrick-on-Shannon and Boyle, they were to close. They ordered that. And Drumsna, they were shooting there too at the time. Some clergy now even denounced the ambush, and they give out stink from the altar. But not Father O'Reilly. All told, the success of the ambush now would give the IRA a great boost. And the Crown forces, they came out of it badly now. See, the authorities in Dublin Castle, they concentrated their reports about it on the actions of Nurse Alice Gray. The commander of the British forces in Ireland, Neville Macready was his name, he ordered his colleagues to make a story of the nurse, but not to use her name. It was on Macready's, on his recommendation now, that she, Nurse Gray, was awarded the Order of the British Empire Medal, and they presented it to her on January 22, 1922, the following year. At Gray's request, it was a private ceremony with the Lord Lieutenant in the Viceregal Lodge, and they said that she said after the ceremony she hoped to head for Canada as quickly and quietly as possible. I went away to America myself after that. But I came home again and I married John Joe Byrne, and we reared 6 children on the farm in Effrina, within shouting distance of Sheemore and the scene of the famous ambush. And 50 years later, they gave me a medal for my services with Common Amon. I'm living now with my daughter, Pauline Creighton. She's taking care of me, God bless her. But what became of Nurse Alice Gray, nobody knows.